Something historic, something terrifying, and something undeniably permanent just happened. As of this moment, a document has emerged from the shadows, a 14-clause memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. It is an agreement that is not supposed to exist, at least not according to the official channels of diplomacy. Yet the text is out there, circulating, analyzed by intelligence agencies, and scrutinized by foreign policy experts who are terrified of what it implies for the future of global stability. This is not a peace treaty. This is a seismic shift in power. We are looking at a deal that, if the leaked text holds any weight, essentially hands Iran a lifeline while simultaneously tying the hands of its greatest adversary. It is a document that suggests the United States is ready to lift its blockade on Iranian ports, waive sanctions on oil exports, and release billions in frozen assets. And for what? A promise of a 60-day negotiation period? A vague commitment to respect sovereignty? The world is watching as the clocks in Switzerland tick down toward a signing ceremony that could redefine the next decade of geopolitical warfare. But there is a haunting question that no one in power seems willing to answer. When you feed a dragon to keep it quiet, what do you think it does once it's full? This is not just about a few signatures on a piece of paper. This is about the total reordering of influence in the most volatile region on Earth. You are watching the crumbling of the old status quo, replaced by a gamble so high stakes that the margin for error is effectively zero. If this agreement is what it appears to be, we are not witnessing the end of a conflict. We are witnessing the start of a massive, long-term empowerment of a regime that has spent decades promising to erase its neighbors. The silence from the official halls of government is deafening. But the text itself? It is screaming. The chaos began with a leak, a document published by foreign policy analysts and Saudi media that mirrors the intelligence reaching the desks of the world's top leaders. For weeks, the whispers were confined to backroom meetings in Riyadh, Washington, and Tehran. Now, the mask has slipped. What we are looking at is an absolute explosion of economic relief for Tehran. The immediate waiver of sanctions on oil exports means that billions of dollars will, within days, begin flowing back into the Iranian economy. And where will that money go? The answer is not hidden in secret code. It is explicitly stated by the regime's own leaders. IRGC commanders and high-ranking officials have made no secret of their intent. The assets being released are not for hospitals or schools. They are for the reconstitution of their missile programs, their drone swarms, and the so-called axis of resistance. This is the power struggle of the century. On one side, a United States administration attempting to buy peace through economic integration, hoping that by feeding the tiger, they can eventually lead it into a cage. On the other side, an Iranian regime that views this deal not as a concession, but as a victory. They see it as a validation of their strategy of attrition. They have pushed the West to the brink in the Strait of Hormuz. They have utilized their proxies to bleed out their rivals, and now they are being handed the financial fuel to accelerate their military machine. Why is it explosive? Because it pits two irreconcilable realities against each other. The agreement claims to be a path to a nuclear-free future, yet Iran's leadership continues to maintain that their internal military development is non-negotiable. They are taking the money, they are taking the sanctions relief, and they are doing so without making a single concrete change to their long-term nuclear aspirations. It is a triumph of strategy for Tehran, and a gamble of historical proportions for Washington. To understand why this agreement is so dangerous, you have to look at the patterns of the last 2 years. This didn't just happen overnight. The escalation in the Strait of Hormuz, the seizing of tankers, the threats to global shipping, the constant suffocating pressure applied by the IRGC was a calculated drumbeat. It was a strategy of controlled chaos. Iran spent months strangling the global energy supply, forcing the world's gaze upon the vital maritime arteries of the Middle East. They knew exactly how much pressure the world could take before the markets collapsed, and just as the pressure reached a breaking point, the offer came. The warnings were there for anyone paying attention. For months, the intelligence community has been tracking the movement of illicit funds and the rapid expansion of Iran's drone capabilities. Every warning that was issued about the danger of appeasement was met with the same slow, bureaucratic response. The escalation pattern was clear: create a crisis, hold the global economy hostage, and then demand a seat at the table to resolve the very crisis you manufactured. It is the oldest trick in the history of international relations, Yet it is working in real time. We saw the rhetoric harden. We saw the threats become more specific. We saw the regional partners of the United States, nations that rely on American security, begin to look elsewhere for their own survival. The tension wasn't just building in the streets or on the water. It was building in the moral consciousness of the international community. Every time a tanker was stopped, every time a threat was issued, the world waited for a response. Instead, they got a memorandum of understanding that reeks of desperation. We were told for years that the goal was to contain Iranian expansion. Now we are being told that the goal is to negotiate with it. The pivot is so sharp, so sudden, and so drastic that it has left the entire regional power structure reeling. The history of this conflict is a graveyard of broken promises, and this document seems designed to add a few more to the pile. Then came the moment that changed the math, the clause that demands an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon. Think about the sheer audacity of this. The regime in Tehran has spent the last year fueling fire across the Levant. They have empowered Hezbollah to turn the Lebanese border into a war zone, and they have used their proxies to keep Israel in a state of perpetual mobilization. And now, this agreement attempts to leverage the influence of the United States to force a ceasefire that effectively protects the regime's most valuable regional asset, the ability to wage war through its proxies. As the text of the agreement suggests, Iran is interpreting this ceasefire as a requirement for Israel to stop its operations and withdraw. The sheer arrogance of this demand is staggering. Israel is not a signatory to this document. They are a nation actively fighting for their security. Yet, here is a document, forged in the shadows of Switzerland, trying to dictate the terms of their survival. The climax of this drama is not the signing itself. It is the moment when the reality hits the battlefield. While diplomats in air-conditioned rooms discuss sovereignty and territorial integrity, the IDF continues to strike targets. The discrepancy between the ink on the page and the fire on the ground is the most accurate measure of this deal's viability. It is a paper-thin attempt to impose logic on an illogical conflict. The drama here is in the disconnect. The world is being told that peace is on the horizon, but the actors on the ground are moving deeper into a state of total war. It is a high-wire act, and the audience knows that the safety net doesn't exist. When you see the phrasing, mutual consent, defined administration, rehabilitation plans, you are seeing the language of a deal that is built to fail, designed only to provide the illusion of progress while the underlying existential threats continue to grow unabated. The shockwaves are already being felt in the corridors of power from London to Tokyo. The economic implications are massive. By lifting the blockade on Iranian ports, the agreement introduces a massive artificial flood of oil into a global market that is already struggling with price volatility. But the real shockwave is the political fallout. Regional partners, the Gulf states, the stakeholders who have stood by the United States for decades, are looking at this agreement and seeing a betrayal. They are asking a fundamental question. If the United States is willing to bypass regional concerns to sign a deal that strengthens their greatest threat, what is the value of their security umbrella? The chaos that this creates is not just about the Middle East. It is about the future of the Western alliance system. When the major power in that alliance starts acting unilaterally to appease an adversary, the entire network begins to fray. Media outlets are scrambling. Analysts are split between those who argue that this is a brilliant diplomatic maneuver and those who see it as a surrender. The uncertainty is the point. By keeping the text semi-private and the details fluid, the architects of this deal have created a vacuum where speculation thrives, and in that vacuum, fear is spreading. The global response has been tepid at best and hostile at worst. It is a masterclass in how to alienate your friends while failing to appease your enemies. The financial markets are reflecting this uncertainty, with energy prices fluctuating based on every new report about the toll-free status of the Strait of Hormuz. Everyone knows that if the IRGC decides to reimpose fees after the 60-day grace period, the global economy will be thrown back into the chaos that defined the last several months. There is no stability here. There is only a temporary pause in the hostilities, and everyone, from the traders on Wall Street to the commanders in the field, knows it. Who gains? Tehran, without a shadow of a doubt. They get the money, they get the legitimacy, and they keep the infrastructure of their resistance intact. They lose nothing that they weren't already prepared to sacrifice in a short-term gamble. Who loses? The stability of the region and the credibility of the United States. Long-term, this change is monumental. It represents a shift from a policy of containment to a policy of accommodation. This is not the beginning of a peaceful era. This is the beginning of a period of rapid rearmament. With the sanctions lifted and the cash flowing, Iran will not spend the next 60 days thinking about peace. They will spend it building the next generation of ballistic missiles and refining the drone swarms that have already proven to be effective against modern air defenses. Is this the beginning of something bigger? It is almost certainly the beginning of a new arms race in the Middle East. If Iran is flush with cash, the regional powers will have no choice but to accelerate their own defense spending. The regional security architecture is being dismantled in front of our eyes. We are moving toward a bipolar Middle East where the United States is no longer the arbiter, but an observer to a clash that it helped fund. The long-term consequence of this deal is a region that is more militarized, more dangerous, and more prone to an accidental spark that could set the entire world on fire. This isn't peace, it's a ceasefire, bought at the expense of our future security. What does this mean for America? It means that our institutions are no longer projecting strength. They are projecting a willingness to compromise with entities that have made their intentions perfectly clear. It means that the democratic commitment to the security of allies is being subordinated to the short-term goal of price stability and temporary diplomatic optics. The global order is shifting. For decades, the United States maintained the status quo through a combination of economic pressure and credible military deterrence. By moving toward a deal that removes the pressure and weakens the deterrence, we are effectively signaling to the world that we are tired. We are showing that we would rather pay for a temporary reprieve than invest in a long-term strategy of strength. This isn't just a political misstep, this is a symptom of a deeper crisis in our foreign policy, a shift away from the principles that built the post-war order toward a model of transactional, short-term survival. When you allow a regime that is actively hostile to your values to dictate the terms of a reconstruction plan worth $300 billion, you aren't leading. You're being managed. The markets will eventually adjust, but the damage to our global standing will take years to repair. We are betting the security of the future on the hope that a regime that hasn't changed its core ideology will suddenly become a responsible stakeholder just because they've been given a check. It is a gamble that ignores history, defies reality, and puts the most dangerous region on the planet on a collision course with a much larger conflict. The story is not over. In fact, it feels like we are just at the beginning of the most volatile chapter yet. The signing in Switzerland is just the start. Once the ink is dry, the real-world consequences will begin to play out in real time. We will see the impact on shipping lanes, we will see the response of our regional partners, and we will see whether the regime in Tehran actually keeps a single one of its promises. History tells us that they won't. And when the deal inevitably hits a wall, when the technical obstacles in the Strait of Hormuz aren't removed, or when the verification steps for the nuclear program are found to be empty, the world will be forced to face the reality that we didn't buy peace. We ogtem adi HRCS aoriacerni. This is the kind of story that doesn't resolve in a single news cycle. It is a slow-motion unraveling of the security framework that has held the world together for a generation. As you watch the developments in the coming days, look past the headlines and the government press releases. Look at the reality of the power balance. Look at who is holding the leverage and who is handing it away. This is not a time for complacency. The world is shifting under our feet, and the decisions made in the coming 60 days will echo for decades. Stay informed, look for the truth behind the curated narratives, and realize that in the world of high-stakes geopolitics, the most dangerous things are often the ones being hidden in plain sight. This is a story about the cost of power, the fragility of peace, and the price we pay when we turn our backs on the hard realities of the world. And believe me, the cost is only beginning to come due.